Special.
Hello, beautiful people, on this fine Tuesday. Welcome to episode 9 of the Clutch Down podcast. This is going to be the first part of a 2-part episode series based completely on the first round of the draft. So this is going to be my mock draft special. We've got a whole load of picks to go through. I'm going to do 16 in this part, and then I'm going to release the second 16, pick 16 to 32 tomorrow. So let's get into it. So kicking things off with pick 1, we've got Jacksonville on the board here. And I'm saying they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson, edge rusher. He's been the consensus number 1 pick for quite a while now. He's definitely the best player available. The most likely to be a plug-in and play player who will play for a decade or longer in the NFL, have easily 10-plus sack seasons. So he's going to be a great addition to Jacksonville. Their ends are currently Malcolm Brown. He had 2 sacks last season. And then Dwayne Smoot, who had 6 sacks last season. They were 24th worst in rush yards per game last season, and they were also 27th worst in sacks, so they need to improve there. This will enhance their pass rush across the board from Josh Allen, and will also help to stop the run. I think that Hutchinson can fit into any scheme, any way you want to run your defense, so he's just really, really going to prosper in Jacksonville. On to pick 2, and the Detroit Lions are on the board. I've got them taking Kayvon Thibodeaux, edge here. He's the second best edge in the draft, at least I think so, and for a team that was 28th in rush yards per game allowed last season and 30th in sacks, they really need help there. He'll be under the mantle of Todd Wash, the Lions defensive line coach, who has lots of experience to extract the best out of Thibodeaux. Currently, the pass rushers for the Lions are Charles Harris and Michael Brockers, who had 7.5 and 1 sack last season respectively. Dan Campbell wants to shift to more 4-man fronts, and I think the thought of Thibodeaux with his hand in the ground chasing off the quarterback is going to be a delight for Lions fans to see, and also for the Lions players to play along with as well. Moving on to pick 3, smashing through this, we're on to the Houston Texans with their first pick of the first round. They've got a second pick later on, and I'm going to go with Evan Neal, offensive tackle. Texans were the 29th worst O-line according to Pro Football Focus last season, especially when it came to run blocking. Laramie Tunsil spent most of the season injured, so with his return, the Texans can bolster their line to protect Davis Mills, who they've said they're committing to for a while, and could be potentially their franchise quarterback. I think Evan Neal has the most upside of any offensive tackle in this year's draft class. I think he's the most complete tackle as well. And I think that the Texans need this position to get bookends for Davis Mills protections. As well as that, there's a lot of depth at receiver, and running backs aren't as important, quote unquote important, so they can get depth there starting in the second round. So I don't think they need to pull the trigger this early on a receiver, and just because of Neal's talent, his strength, what he does in run blocking, pass blocking, it's going to be a great pick for the Texans. Now we're on to pick 4, and we've got the New York Jets on the clock. I've got them taking Trayvon Walker, edge rusher. So I mentioned this in the last episode. Trayvon Walker has crazy upside, maybe the most upside of any player in this year's draft class. He's definitely the most raw talent in the draft and will be a massive help to the Jets, who were 26th worst in sacks last season and also 29th worst in rush yards per game. They went high on Zach Wilson with one of their first round picks last year, and they also went O-line with Elijah Vera Tucker late in the first round. So it seems to be the most logical fit that they go defense here. Walker fits into the 4-3 system that Salah likes to run. He can utilize his strength, speed, and size here, and is just going to be an absolute cornerstone of that Jets defense. Now we're on to pick 5, and we come to the first of 2 New York Giants picks. I've got them going with offensive tackle Ikem Ekwonu here. He's the best run blocker in the draft, which I believe the Giants have needed for a long time. When you've been watching them for the past few seasons and you see Saquon Barkley getting knocked back 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage every time, you know that you need to improve there. The Giants O-line was the 30th worst O-line last season based on Pro Football Focus, and they were also 24th in rush yards last season. They were also 16th in sacks allowed, so middle of the road for sacks allowed, but really, really bad across the board everywhere else. This is going to give Daniel Jones protection. It's also going to give a chance for Saquon Barkley to shine now going into this next season, which is a bit of a make or break year for him. Will they trade him? Will they keep him? Will he go back to his rookie self and the flashes that he's shown over the past few seasons? They also made some moves on O-line and free agency with bringing in Glaukinski and Feliciano. So I think by that logic, they're going to go lineman here to sort of finish off that last piece of their offensive line puzzle. Now we're on to pick 6, and we've got the Carolina Panthers on the board, one of the more contentious picks of the first round. And I've gone with a contentious pick here with Malik Willis, quarterback. So I reckon he's going to be the first quarterback coming off the board for a team that was 29th in pass yards last season, 31st in pass touchdowns, going with a mix of Cam Newton and Sam Darnold, which was hardly the most lucrative of quarterback partnerships last year. Carolina has the receivers, they've got the running backs. I think they've got enough talent there to put Willis in a good place. They obviously don't have the best O-line. To be honest, it's pretty atrocious. But based off how the Bengals did things over the past couple of seasons with Joe Burrow, it seems like they're more likely to get their quarterback or attempt to get their quarterback than go with O-line and focus on O-line straight away. Taylor Maton played well last season. They just signed Austin Corbett, who just won a Super Bowl with the Rams. So I think it's logical they go for a similar route to the Bengals, get a quarterback who can improve, isn't going to be a bona fide first-year rookie of the year type player. He's going to need some time to develop and probably needs more developing than any of the other quarterbacks in this class, but definitely has the most upside. But if you're pairing with great receivers, a great running back room, they can then focus on the O-line with later picks and try to develop him, develop his sense of pressure when he gets into the big league, into the NFL. On to pick 7 now, and we have the second of the New York Giants picks. I've got them taking Sauce Gardner, cornerback, first cornerback off the board. They were middle of the road in pass yards and interceptions last season, and it looks like they're going to let Bradbury walk or trade him. So this gives them a plug-in and play cornerback. He can play in both zone and man schemes, which is invaluable in a division where you've got CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, and Terry McLaurin. If you need him to man up with those guys, he can and has that cornerback 1 potential at one of the hardest positions in the NFL. Or if you need him to sit back in zone, he can make some big plays there. I just don't think that the Giants are going to pass up this opportunity, and they went offense with their previous pick, so they get big cornerstones on their offensive line and then their secondary here early in the first round. Now on to pick 8, and we've got Atlanta Falcons. To be honest, Atlanta's one of these teams that needs to improve everywhere. They've got potentially one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL and need some talent there. But I think for them, it's a best player available situation, which for me is Kyle Hamilton, the safety. Mentioned him a couple of podcasts ago, said he's a massive talent. He definitely needs some coaching to really reach his full potential at the next level. And there was some grey area based off some of his post-workouts, like after the combine. But, you know, when it comes to workouts and it comes to how a player plays on the field, you've just got to look at his tape and see how he plays on the field. That might not necessarily translate to the fastest 40 time. But when he plays how he plays on the field, you can't pass up that. He's an amazing safety, best safety in the class, and is going to be a real bright spot for that Falcons secondary. Obviously, they had a great rookie year from AJ Terrell last season, and they brought in Casey Hayward, so they're very much improving at cornerback, and you're combining Kyle Hamilton with defensive coordinator Dean Pease, so that's going to do him wonders for his development. You know, they had the worst pass rush in the league last year. They had 18 sacks overall, which was less than Robert Quinn had by himself, the Bears pass rusher. But in free agency, they added Lorenzo Carter, who had a really good end to last season, a really strong end to last season, and Dante Fowler. So it seems, for me, to be too odd for them to go and take a pass rusher that high here. I think if they hadn't made those moves, it would make sense. But with the moves that they've made, it seems like safety is the best option here, and they're putting in really the building blocks everywhere on that defense. On to pick number 9, and we got the Seattle Seahawks here. You know, if Malik Willis drops, I see them taking him here, but I don't think he's going to drop past Carolina. And then you've also got other teams there. For example, there's a chance Atlanta might take Malik Willis. So I don't think he's going to fall to 9. So with that in mind, I'm saying the Seahawks pick Charles Cross, offensive tackle. Russell Wilson last year, before he hightailed over to the Denver Broncos, was under pressure on 37% of his dropbacks. And they brought back Rashad Penny in free agency. They've got Chris Carson. They love their run game. So I think they're probably going to bring in a veteran quarterback for next season with the Panthers picking Malik Willis. I reckon that the Seahawks are going to get Baker Mayfield. And with Baker Mayfield at the helm, they're going to need some protection there, but not just protection there, also a good player in the run game. So this gives him this. He's a great pass blocker, Charles Cross, and he's only going to improve as a run blocker over the season, combining him with Pete Carroll. He seems to be constantly improving in college, so this bodes very well for the NFL. You know, a player you can coach who is going to improve and rise up to the challenge. At pick 10, I've got the first wide receiver coming off the board for the New York Jets, their second pick in the first round, and I've got them going with Drake London. So they were 20th in passing yards last season. Their top receiver last year was rookie Elijah Moore. He was starting to really develop as the season was going on and showed flashes of being a number one wide receiver. He only played in 11 games, and he's more of like a smaller, quick-footed receiver, but he did continuously improve, and you can kind of play him everywhere. I think that Zach Wilson's going to take a big leap in his second year. I think that Elijah Moore's going to take a big leap in his second year. And so I think they're going to want to make Zach Wilson's life as easy as possible, giving him another big receiver to work with. For me, Garrett Wilson's the top prospect, but I think he's too similar of a player to Elijah Moore, like quick twitch ability, that pace. So I don't think they're going to go with Garrett Wilson here. I think you can line London up outside, and then that gives you the opportunity to play more all over the field. So for me, London makes sense as the pick here. Now on to pick 11, and we're on to the Washington Commanders. So, contrary to what I just said with the New York Jets situation, I think it's the opposite for the Washington Commanders. I think that McLaurin is a great player to line up outside, and so with my pick here, I say they're going to pick Garrett Wilson, wide receiver. They need a quick twitch receiver they can line up inside the slot, line up who can run deep, take the top of the defense, play them all over. I think that Wilson and McLaurin complement each other in how they play. And their wide receiver 2 last year was Adam Humphries, who had nearly 700 yards less than McLaurin did. Washington have great pieces on defense, a lot of first-round picks on the defensive line. On offense, they have a good line and they have a good backfield. They've also just brought in Wentz. So I think they give him another target here to work with outside of McLaurin and improve that offense. We're now on to pick 12, and we got the Minnesota Vikings on the clock. Probably the more easier picks to predict and the more logical picks to predict. And so I've got them taking Derek Stingley, the cornerback. Minnesota Vikings, they had a great time rushing the passer last season. They were second in sacks. But to say the least, they had really bad cornerback play. That led to the 28th most pass yards allowed in the league. They've brought back an aging Patrick Peterson, who can still play well, but he's well into his 30s now. He's not going to play for a lot longer in the NFL. And bringing in Stingley, you've got that LSU connection between the two of them. So you're almost drafting the Patrick Peterson of the future. Stingley's a versatile player, lots of speed and physicality. There's injury concerns, but with cornerback being one of the hardest positions to play in the NFL, Stingley having cornerback 1 potential based off his freshman season, I just don't think that the Vikings are going to pass up on him here. Now we're on to pick 13, and we have the second pick in the first round for the Houston Texans. I've got them taking Jermaine Johnson, defensive end here. They were 27th in sacks last season. Jonathan Greenard had 8 sacks. That was good for him. But they need an explosive player that they can plug in on that defensive line. Johnson has that explosiveness. And, when you're playing, you just have an explosive player who can be a presence on defense. That's what they need. They do need to improve at cornerback, but I think with Johnson still on the board here, it makes the most sense to go with him. He's going to need some time to improve when he reaches the NFL, but based off the picks that the Texans have acquired from the Watson trade, I'd say they're going to slowly put the building blocks in place on that team. They're not looking for bona fide starters who are going to come in year 1 and be a win-now team. So with this pick, it gives Johnson the time to develop, and then in year 2, I just think that Johnson's going to be an absolute monster. Now we're on to pick 14, and we've got the Baltimore Ravens. This is probably going to be my most controversial pick of the first round, because I've got them going with David Ojabo, the edge rusher. The Ravens team was plagued with injuries last season. They're obviously a playoff caliber team, potentially a Super Bowl caliber team, but their team was all over the place when it came to injuries last year. So they shouldn't really, they don't have the lack of talent to be picking at 14. They should definitely be picking later. So for me, this gives them the chance to take a bit of a risk on a player. Ojabo's got some incredible upside, and the Falcons right now are pretty set at edge rusher, and they had no trouble stopping the run last year. So with the two players they've got Derek Wolfe and they've got Calais Campbell back. So veteran players that Ojabo can develop behind, and they don't have to rush him back from his injury. Without the injury, I reckon Ojabo would have gone top 10. So for the Ravens, they take a risk and they can get a steal here. I think he's going to bolster a Ravens defense that was 22nd in sacks last season. He's a freak athlete and he's going to thrive in Baltimore's 3-4 defense. Similar to Jermaine Johnson, I think year 2 in the NFL is going to be Ojabo's year, but putting him behind the veteran players, he can learn, he can develop, he can slowly come back from his injury, and will give a high-risk, high-reward pick for the Ravens that I think is definitely going to pay off. Now we're on to pick 15, our penultimate pick of the first part of this mock draft, and we've got Philadelphia on the board. I've got them taking Chris Olave, wide receiver here. Jalen Hurts improved as a passer last season, and they were a predominantly run-heavy offense, but to be a great offense, you need to be able to adapt, and you can't always focus on that run game and just go, all right, we'll cash all our chips, we'll go on the run game, and that's just going to work every time, because it won't. So they need to have some versatility there. Devonta Smith had a great rookie season. They've got Dallas Goedert at tight end. Quez Watkins stepped up, but Watkins, I think, is best utilized as a deep threat. He caught some amazing deep balls last year, and Olave has the talent to match Smith. Philly still have a great O-line. They've got a great backfield, so it makes sense to put another piece in front of Hurts and help him improve as a passer and improve that offense overall. Then, if the Hurts experiment doesn't work with everything they've put in place, they have all the building blocks to use another one of their first-round picks next year to pick a quarterback, or, pick a quarterback later in this year or later in next year. So they've got all the building blocks around on the offense for a quarterback to come in and succeed. Olave can line up outside, and this gives a chance to play Smith in the slot a little more. Then he can use his run after catch ability and play a bit more dynamically for the Eagles offense. They can run screens, they can run those short passes, run underneath. So it just opens up a whole new world for that Philadelphia offense. And the final pick of this first part of the mock draft, we've got pick 16, which is the New Orleans Saints. I've got them taking Jameson Williams, wide receiver. So Michael Thomas is still the Saints wide receiver 1, but he's been plagued by injuries the last few seasons. Marquez Callaway stepped up last year, but he isn't a true number 1 and is more of a really, really good depth guy. There's a chance that they could go with a quarterback here, but because they doubled down with Jameis Winston in free agency and picked up Andy Dalton, I think they're going to focus more on putting the pieces around Winston to succeed. So this gives him another great target to work with, who can be a number 1 wide receiver in Thomas's absence if Thomas can't play. Or if Thomas can play and gets back for his injuries, then he can be a top threat in conjunction with him. So it's a win-win, basically. Saints do need O-line help, but because the next 2 picks are going to be the Los Angeles Chargers and Philadelphia, who are pretty good on O-line, I think that they're going to wait until their second pick to get help there. For me, without his ACL tear, I could have easily seen Williams being the top wide receiver in the draft. But based off of the ACL tear and depending on when he's going to come back, what the timeline is of that, I think that the Saints are going to take him here and give Winston another piece to work with. Okay, brilliant. So that was the first 16 picks of this mock draft. Tomorrow I'll be doing the picks from 17 to 32, the next 16 picks in the draft. But to finish things off today, I'm going to give you my album of the week. So my album of the week this week is Volume 2 by Sad Night Dynamite. These guys are a couple of guys from Somerset. They were a random band that I found on Spotify. Literally just doing my Discover Spotify, then searching, listening to a few songs. And there were so many bad indie albums that came up. I just couldn't be asked with them. I tried the first song. Okay, sounds like the same thing. Next album sounds like exactly the same thing. We're just looking for that variety. And then this random lo-fi hip-hop band comes up. I start listening to them and then just fall in love with the album. It was actually their second album they've released, but their first album was only released last year, so they're quite a new band to get into. They actually remind me of Glass Animals, who I'm a big fan of, and I found out when I was doing some research on the band, they actually supported Glass Animals on their Dreamland tour earlier this year. Favourite songs on the album are Psychedelic Views and Demon, so it's well worth a listen. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like it, please give it a rating on Spotify and share it with your friends. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok on the handle @ClutchdownPodcast. I always share info about future episodes and clips from current episodes. I will catch you tomorrow for the next half of this first round mock draft. See you later.